Welcome to the Starzology podcast. This is your host, Arwynne O'Neill, and today we are with my special guest, my mother, Sionnaine O'Neill, and we are going to be talking about her stellium of planets in Libra in the 5th house. So if you have anything in Libra, this should be interesting. If you have anything in the 5th house, this should be interesting. And if you have any experience with ballet or the arts or any of the things that we're going to talk about, this should be super interesting for you. And also, it's a great mother-daughter conversation. Welcome.
And thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too.
Let's talk about what you have in the 5th house. And then I'll give a little bit of an overview of what all those mean, and then we'll get into what it means in your chart. So you have Virgo actually on the cusp of the 5th house. But then all of the planets you have in the 5th house are in Libra. Your Libra planets are Mars, Saturn, Venus, and Neptune. You've got Mars at 2 degrees, Saturn at 12 degrees, Venus at 18, and Neptune at 20. So that is a rolling stellium, as they say. They're not all conjunct, but the Saturn, Venus, and Neptune are conjunct. And they're all in the 5th house, which I think is a pretty good placement for Libra, since Libra is the planet of beauty, balance, love, relationships. It's one of the planets or one of the signs rather, that's ruled by Venus, and Taurus, but it's kind of the more mature of the Venus signs, I would say. Yeah, I mean, I think of it as like, it's almost like the Ginger and Marianne. It's like the Taurus is the Marianne and Libra is the Ginger. It's like the maiden versus the woman. But it's also the more self-contained of the two. Ginger had her own career. She was a movie star. Let's not belabor the metaphor too much.
That's interesting. I think of Libra as the more airy intellectual side.
Absolutely. Yeah, versus like the earthy. If you're going to go tarot deck, it's the more high priestess of the, versus the empress.
Indeed.
Yeah, and the empress is like Taurus, the homemaker kind of.
Yeah. Balance and beauty for the sake of balance and beauty, but it's very intellectual. It's very airy.
Yeah.
Kind of detached.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Which a lot of people don't think about Libra as being particularly detached, but that's how I've experienced it.
Yeah. Well, they say that Saturn is the co-ruler. So it's Venus and
sense. Saturn,
which is, and you've got them conjunct, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
So let's first give a little bit of an overview, because we do like to we think that a lot of our listeners are probably astrologers or at least, astrology curious, but we like to sort of give a little bit of a basic intro to our stuff here. Mm-hmm. Let's just take a bit of a Stephen Arroyo break here, which we always like to do. What does it mean to have those planets that we just talked about in Libra? Let's just go in order here and say like Venus and then Mars and then Saturn and then Neptune. So Venus in Libra, which actually, interestingly, both of us have. Mm-hmm. Mine's in the 11th house, yours is in the 5th house, which are opposites, which is fascinating. Stephen Arroyo has this to say about Venus in Libra. It expresses affection lightly, considerately, charmingly, and harmoniously. Give and take with others is colored by balance, fairness, and gentleness, which I think we could totally relate to. Mm-hmm. Emotionally colored tastes are affected by a need to harmonize polarities and to appreciate symmetry and traditional beauty, a deep need for peace, tranquility, and harmony in order to feel comfort and pleasure. But this could lead to avoidance of unpleasant emotional interchanges and thus limit the scope of intimacy, and the need to develop relationships based on equal sharing and cooperation in order to give one's emotions.
Yeah, I can see myself at different ages having handled it differently.
Right.
Definitely.
How would you say that? I don't know how deep we want to delve. I mean, having Venus and Libra, I think since we both have that, I think we could totally see that playing out differently in our relationships.
Well, yeah, I think we both have had that wanting the perfect relationship, having this image everybody may have in one level or another, but it's a definite drive to find that perfect balance, and that it's harmonious and graceful and not ugly.
Yeah, and that people see you as a it sounds weird to say that you want people to see you as the perfect couple, but I can definitely see that in myself, that compulsion. And I think anyone who has listened to more than one episode of the podcast will have heard about my partner.
Right.
We've both interestingly been with our partners for about the same amount of time.
Yep. Almost 30 years.
For me. Yeah, almost 30 years. Yeah, so I think we can check that off the list. Yeah, perfect relationship. Right. done. Yeah, what that actually plays out like in those relationships, for me, a perfect relationship is there's very much like an equal partnership thing. It's not equal in everything. You trade off, you feel like you're best friends. And I think you definitely have that as well with your partner.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and the Sagittarian 7th house goes in that direction too, of definitely wanting to have a best friend.
Best friend, partner in crime.
Yeah,
Totally. A travel buddy.
Right.
That's super important, being able to travel well together.
Yeah, and we've done all those things.
Yeah. We could talk about Venus forever. That could be its own podcast. But let's skip over.
The interest of the stellium.
Yeah, the interest of the stellium. We'll definitely come back to Venus because I think that's kind of the anchor. I mean, it's right there in the middle of all of the others.
Yeah.
So it's, it's at 18. So it's not conjunct Mars. But it's interesting to have Venus and Mars in the same sign, even if they're not conjunct. That's super interesting, especially it being Libra. Let's talk about Libra Mars. Again, from the Chart Interpretation Handbook by Stephen Arroyo. Mars in Libra asserts itself sociably, cooperatively, charmingly. Charm is a recurring theme here.
Definitely.
And with direct relatedness. Desire to harmonize all polarities underlies one's will toward action. The physical energy and decisiveness are strongly affected by one's close relationships and by aesthetic influences. Initiative and drive are tactfully and tactically directed toward balance and fairness. Pursuit of one's desires can be hindered by indecisiveness while one weighs the options. So how do you feel about that description?
I see that as kind of describing my ballet career. Because it was such I even spoke of it in a way of putting all my creativity and all my passion and all my desire for beauty and grace through the rigorous training of Russian training for ballet. I can really see that Mars aspect there because it was such a drive to be perfect and to be perfectly turned out, perfectly formed, everything, which has a negative side.
Yeah.
And just in the other behaviors that it can lead to for a ballet dancer.
Right.
Which it did.
When did you start ballet? Like what age were you?
When my mother finally let me take classes from somebody else other than her, I was 8.
Okay.
So, which would seem late, but mother, having also been a dancer, opted to try and teach me at first, and that ended in tears, her yelling, me crying. So that really didn't work out too well.
Right.
But the desire to dance didn't go away.
Yeah.
And specifically ballet. That wasn't mother's choice.
Yeah.
Because,
let's back it up a little bit. She was also a dancer, but a different type of dancer.
Yeah. Yeah, because she was more jazz and modern.
Right. Ballet was a rebellious thing for you.
Yeah. To go into ballet was rebelling against mother's more worldly jazz and modern dance.
Yeah. And without throwing your age out there, we're gonna go ahead and say that this is in the late 50s.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah.
And and I guess we kind of have to confess to I was born on mother's birthday.
Yeah.
So
you're both Sagittarians.
So there was that almost assumption that we would do so many things alike, and so that was my first grasping of something that was going to be mine.
Right.
And then just that drive, and I've always seen that Venus and Mars, even before we get to the Saturn and Neptune, since those are further out, but being such a drive that precipitated the physical work that I did on my body that I'm paying for now, and the eating disorders and the things that go along in that strive for perfection.
Right.
And that's all wrapped up in that 5th house.
For sure.
It's all that creativity.
Absolutely. Well, let's really quickly jump over to another Stephen Forrest, who wrote an amazing book called The Inner Sky, The Dynamic New Astrology for Everyone. And this is new as of published 1984. Yes. He's one of the greats of astrology. And he has this to say about the 5th house, the house of children, but it's also the house of creativity, of what you produce out of creativity. So that could be children, that could be art, that could be dance, that could be performance. It's also, interestingly, the house of gambling and the house of love, not partnerships, which is the 7th house, and not marriage, which is the 8th house, but romantic love and a romantic outlook, which in your case is 100% true, but also it's the house of pleasure, of falling in love, playfulness, joyful anticipation of each day, and the development of a creative outlook through which tangible evidence of one's internal processes may be expressed. So that's where the performance comes in. It's also, I think I said the house of gambling, which is bizarre. But there is a sense of a gamble to performance, to, you know.
Yeah, I know. I used to toss off a line when people say, you know, do you gamble or something, you know, something about the fifth house. And it's like, no, I've never gambled anything but my life.
Amazing. Yeah.
And because that would be like, okay, I picked up and, you know, at 16, took the train to Toronto to go join the National Ballet of Canada.
Yeah.
Without knowing a soul in Canada.
Yeah.
You know, that was a gamble. I've done things like that all my life of, you know, remaking whatever it was that I was doing.
Right.
And that's a gamble. And those things are part of that creativity, I think.
Definitely.
And even now, I just had a thought on that, thinking of just love and being an expression of love, and thinking about my work with wildlife.
Yeah.
And part of why the deer come to our yard and come up on our porch, you know, because there's that feeling that they're welcome.
Oh my God, yeah. Okay, so just for our listeners here, every other photo that you send is either of the wonderful cat family that you have, or outside of your home, you have this amazing little forest that's, you know, it doesn't go back too far because, you know, you do live in Bellingham and it's a small city. You have this forest where the deer come, you have squirrels, you have birds that come, you have this whole little wildlife preserve,
little
like,
sanctuary
just outside your backyard. And we'll be sitting there having a drink or having some coffee, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's Liam. It's like, who? Oh, it's a deer. It's this amazing, like, male, female. You have names for all of them.
Yeah.
This is not like just random deer. These are named
these are
family members. And there are like, what, 12-ish?
Yeah.
Like,
about 12.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, we haven't seen Liam this year yet. Oh, there he is, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, them and the squirrels, but everybody knows they're welcome, and you know, and I think that's part of that. It creates that sense of comfort, the awe of the beauty of all of it.
Yeah, and creating something that's a beautiful sanctuary. You have also planted amazing flower bushes. You have roses.
Lots of credit to my partner for that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he's always doing some crafting, doing some gardening, doing some carpentry. You've got this wonderful trellis that has like
the wisteria.
Wisteria, that's right.
Honeysuckle.
Yeah,
yeah. Of course, he does have the moon in Libra.
Yeah, there you go.
Conjunct my Venus and Neptune.
one could only hope.
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay. So the fifth house is all about creativity, joy, all of that stuff, all that creativity. So let's go back to Mars in Libra. So when people think of ballet, if they're not involved in it, they might just think of what they see on the surface. This is, it's graceful, it's beautiful, it's old world, but it is also an incredibly arduous athletic pursuit, which is Mars. There's a lot of athleticism. It's a battle. Exactly. It's difficult. And you committed to this at the age of 8. Mm-hmm. And how long did you do that? And then what happened?
Basically until I was early 30s and had a severe ankle injury. And that ended the ability to perform for long enough, because that was over a year in recovery.
Yeah.
And so then I sort of segued over to wildlife work.
Yeah.
I came back to ballet because I realized I couldn't live without it, and started teaching more.
You had your own studio.
Yeah. And now I'm kind of putting that together with nature, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself. So. Oh,
not at all. Because this is Mars, but then also let's bring in Saturn, because Saturn is all about teaching. Yeah. It's about the commitment, and it's about
discipline.
Discipline, exactly. And then we will also talk about your students, which is, for me, it's a fascinating thing, because I, like, full disclosure, only child. When you had your studio and you used to send me these pictures of all of your beautiful little ballet students, all ages, from like these 4-year-old little princesses up to teenage girls who you were like their second home. And I'm like, oh wow, I have baby sisters all of a sudden. But okay, so Saturn in Libra. Saturn in Libra, from this is the chart interpretation handbook, back to Stephen Arroyo. It seeks to establish and preserve itself through the ability to relate to others fairly and responsibly, It consciously organizes schedules, relationships, and all structures upon principles of balance and harmony. Fear of committed partnership can hinder achievement and prevent a sense of satisfying intimacy. I don't know if you have that problem. Probably not, but
I can't say that. No, not really.
Not fear of partnership. Maybe of commitment. Maybe a fear of committing to one thing to the exclusion of other things.
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Disciplined effort is put into maintaining relationships. All commitments, promises, and duties are honored and can bring deep satisfaction. And a desire to please other people can inhibit the acceptance of distasteful duties, but tactfulness and impartiality can bring social approval.
And I think probably in the last years, I've learned the most about being able to gracefully establish boundaries.
Right.
And gracefully be able to put boundaries around things so that I make better choices.
Interesting.
Professionally.
Right.
Anyway, and and now being back in academia, being a person, I will tell anybody in school, that I'm all about the forest.
Yeah.
Don't tie me to one tree. I am all about the forest. But I also realize that within that, I can make pathways.
Yeah.
So that I can adapt the vision. And that's all about creatively, positively using that Saturn and still trying to make it as graceful as possible, because that's just me.
Yeah, totally. 12 degrees Saturn, 18 degrees Venus, and 20 degrees Neptune. That's definitely like a rolling conjunction, as they say. And I don't know if they say that, that's what I call it.
I'll roll with that.
Yeah, exactly. So you also have Neptune in Libra, and that's at 20 degrees, and that's tightly conjunct Venus. Neptune conjunct Venus is interesting. Libra, okay, so Neptune in Libra, that's a generational aspect. I have it in Sagittarius. Neptune in Libra, to me, that is the absolute flower child placement.
Yeah.
You are clearly of that generation, which is a little too young to have gone to Woodstock, but old enough to have helped in the Draft Dodgers, which is, appreciated.
I was in Toronto with the year Woodstock. That was my first year in Canada.
Yeah.
And a bunch of my friends went.
Yeah.
I stayed and worked. Which, that's very odd.
Yeah. No, that's it. There's that Saturn.
But the Neptune in Libra, a thing that just occurred to me when I've talked about trying to bring dance and social justice.
Yeah.
And that when I was dancing in Toronto, which is a perfect example that, I got to Toronto through the help of the American Draft Dodgers and Deserters Association of Toronto.
Yeah.
And because there was that need and that desire to somehow work in social justice.
Yeah.
And I had done marching against the Vietnam War and all of that.
God, yeah.
But those
coming of age in the late
that,
60s, yeah.
Right, in San Francisco.
Right.
In Toronto, in the ballet studio, it was like a whole nother world. It's like the social justice and inequities that were going on outside of the world, in the world, didn't exist in the studio.
Interesting.
And that was always a dichotomy that I had a hard time with, because I loved the fairyland, but I also knew there were all these things going on out in the world that were, socially unjust that I felt I should be able to do something about.
Yeah.
But at that time, I didn't have a comfortable avenue to put those things together when all of that energy is obviously there.
Yeah.
And it's only more recently that, that I'm finding ways that I can actually put those things together, put the arts and the environmental and social justice work together. And I think that all fits into that fifth house.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you're a Sagittarius, very educated, worldly, intellectual, pioneering, adventurous, but also very moral, sort of.
Yeah.
And
wanting to do the right thing.
Yeah, the flaming arrows of justice and all that stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've had to wait so long, and I don't say wait because you've been active this entire time, but in order for the world to kind of come around to being like, oh yeah, that's cool,
right.
Dance and social justice, sure,
Yeah.
And the environment and wildlife
about it anymore.
and the forest,
Yeah.
I mean, you get funny looks, but it's more a funny look of like, wow, as opposed to like, that's weird.
Yeah. And it's very gratifying now to have people go, oh, wow, that's incredible work that you're, talking about doing.
Right.
And suddenly I make sense.
Yeah. About time.
Yeah, really. Where have you guys been?
So let's talk about, let's just interlude here to water dance. Because that seems to be like an amazing kind of little confluence that really can illustrate how this works in your chart. So the Global Water Dance.
So Global Water Dance, so it's an international group that combines dance and film to educate people around the world about the needs for clean drinking water. And so once a year, around the world at 180 plus locations, groups of dancers and non-dancers get together and create a dance and in some sort of venue where they can educate the community and hopefully involve the community in understanding about the importance of the water in their local area, their local watershed, as well as water conditions worldwide, and how they're all connected, and that there's something that we can all do individually and collectively to improve the situation.
Yeah.
And that doing it through dance, for me, I find it's a way of creating resistance and renewal, but it's less threatening to a lot of people. The arts can do it in a way that's less threatening and more encouraging people to belong, encouraging people to move and dance together.
Well, it also draws on eons of human history.
Yeah.
Of dance being something that unites people, and it's beyond language, it's beyond different languages, it's beyond words.
It's like the ultimate language.
Yeah.
For us to be able to reclaim that language and then use it for environmental and social justice.
Yeah.
To me is sort of the perfect cocktail.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. That was just a little interlude because we were talking about Neptune, but I'm going to now read a little bit about the conjunction between Venus and Saturn and then Venus and Neptune. You have both of those. So this isn't just about Libra. This is about if our listeners have Venus and Saturn or Venus and Neptune tight aspects between these planets. This is what this means according to Stephen Arroyo. So in Venus-Saturn interchanges, he describes this as expressions of love are easier when one feels very secure and stable. Steadiness of affection through loyalty, great depth of love can be expressed if fears can be released, and the need to feel close enough to another person through shared effort, accepted responsibilities, and mutual commitment. A hesitance to express affection unless guarantees are present, and this unadventurous approach may lead to a rather dismal social life, which is, I wouldn't say you have a dismal social life, but what I would say is I've seen, as your daughter, that your relationship to your partner absolutely comes first.
Yeah.
That you have had friendships. You've had some amazing friendships that have lasted over the years, but very, very few. You are not what I would call like as social and as outgoing and wonderful as you probably sound to our listeners. You're definitely not a social butterfly.
No.
You are a student. You are a homebody. You are definitely a dedicated partner. And you have like one or two or maybe three friends at a time who are like incredibly loyal and devoted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really have to get me. Yeah.
And also, I mean, moving around a lot probably has not helped that so much. Nowadays it's easier to keep in touch with people, but throughout your entire life, like just uprooting and moving to another country or across one coast to another would definitely
frequently bouncing back and
unless
forth.
People were like really good letter writers, that would have been like, well,
there was a time.
Best of luck, So that's Venus and Saturn. So Venus-Neptune interchanges. Here we go. Yearns for a state of ideal love. Lives in a dream of romantic, artistic, or spiritual bliss. I can see you laughing already. Nebulous fears or escapism can inhibit real relatedness. Need to express affection in order to experience a oneness with life, a complete merger with the whole, and refines and sensitizes the affections. So,
yeah. Yeah, and that's I mean, I can certainly acknowledge all of that.
So favorite movies, I'm thinking Princess Bride is right up there.
Yeah.
I know you've seen Titanic about 1 million times.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Tinkerbell, a lot of fairy imagery, a lot of pre-Raphaelite art.
Oh, yeah, the pre-Raphaelite.
Yeah, there's a lot of Venus-Neptune imagery. Just, if one enters your home, it's like right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the role, I mean, my favorite role that I always, that I didn't get to do that I feel bad about was Juliet. To do Romeo and Juliet. And, the total angst and love or die.
Yeah.
That level, it's like that's not a level that just like went away when I was 14.
And if you can't have the undying perfect love, then death by poison.
Yeah.
What could be more Venus Neptune than that?
Right.
I compare that to my like Venus conjunct Pluto, which is like I would kill or die for you. That's my ideal romance. Is the movie True Romance, where it's like it's not true love unless you're willing to kill for you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And I'm looking at your nautilus. You have a nautilus necklace right now, which I think is an amazing image of Venus Neptune too.
Yeah, and it's just the whole thing of the nautilus too, being the chambers, and it's so perfectly designed, and
the spiral, the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, and and it's all about renewal and survival.
Yeah, and carrying your home on your back, which I'm sure you have
certainly done.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked a bit about your education in ballet, your interlude into wildlife preservation and rescuing animals, your wildlife preserve that you have on your property. Let's also talk a bit about the last few years and what you've done with your educational pursuit.
Well, 2018, I was thankfully fired from a job that I was miserable at.
Oh, we say laid off.
Oh.
Just kidding.
They told me to go away, that I didn't fit their business model.
Yikes.
And after I had sort of a free fall moment of panic, I realized that I was ecstatic and I was now free to do what I really wanted to do, which was go back to school. And at a certain age, when you go back to school as a displaced worker, they tried to put me in a program that seemed to fit my profile, which was to be a physical therapy assistant, combining my anatomy, physiology, medical background, and dance, and then I can be an assistant to a physical therapist. And after a year, I realized I didn't want to be an assistant to anybody.
Yeah.
And so I went and finished my bachelor's, and took another year and got my master's, and I'm now working on my PhD. The title, I think, would probably speak to the fifth house. My working title for my dissertation, which is Aesthetic Activism for Environmental Healing and Justice.
Amazing. Yeah.
So just thinking, aesthetic activism, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be active and go for it. But please, we need to make it has to look pretty. It has to be with beauty and balance and grace.
Yeah.
The message for the work that I want to do is certainly important and crucial and critical, because it has to do with, saving the environment.
Yeah.
But it also has to do with, to me, a very Librian concept of relationships, because to save the environment, we have to recognize our relationship with nature.
Yeah.
And
we're not just the human saviors who are going to fix everything.
Right.
We have to recognize that we're all part of
it's all family.
We're all nature. Yeah.
And we have to reclaim that relationship so that we can repair it.
Right.
And hopefully, there's still time that we can do that. I am ever hopeful.
Yes.
Just because for me, there's no choice.
Yeah.
I can only maintain depression about the state of the world for so long.
You also have Gemini rise, which
yes, it helps. It helps immensely.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
because then it's just I come to a point where it's like, okay, I'm done now. Move on.
Yeah.
What change can I make? If anything, it's recognizing that the smaller changes are okay. It doesn't have to be the grand sweeping Sagittarian, knock them all off their feet change.
Yeah.
That it can be smaller changes and still be valuable.
Yeah.
And that's been a more recent lesson.
Interesting. That so reminded me of, I don't know if this is like a weird kind of left field reference, but the movie Born into Brothels, which came out in like 2005, when this wonderful photographer went to, I believe it was Calcutta, and was filming, she wanted to interview the women who worked in the brothels there. And instead of doing that, which she began to do, she ended up befriending all of these wonderful children who were the children of the sex workers, who just followed her around and were fascinated by her camera. And she ended up buying them all disposable cameras and sending them off into the the wilds
their world to take pictures.
And brought them to New York. They had a big opening. They published this amazing coffee table book of their incredible, just raw, wonderful photos.
And that's some beautiful aesthetic activism right there.
100%. And my favorite, like, I don't know if I'm quoting it directly, but my favorite line from that, and which I've taken, forward in life, is, you can't save everyone, you can't save the world, but these 10 children, like, you can make a difference in their lives.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with just doing that, And that's where we all
they're
have to
going to
start.
make a change in the people that they interact with.
And everyone who sees the movie.
Yeah.
And
exactly. The ripple effect happens.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. I mean, we could go on, and I will definitely pull you into another episode very soon.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
This has been delightful.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer, or someone who's learning astrology, or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.